Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to EFL Debate. This is the League One podcast. Just wondering about the relegation battle in League One. It looks like anyone up to Mansfield in 15th could get dragged in. So I'm wondering, James, my co-host for the evening, what have you made of the League One relegation battle this season?
It's been an interesting one. I think, obviously, at the start of the season, there looked like there was a real lack of quality down there. There was quite a big disparity between the sides towards the top end of the division and the ones at the bottom. But lately, there's been a whole host of points picked up by a range of sides down there. It's changing by the game week. And honestly, you cannot call it at the moment. Any of the sides down there could go down, could stay up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's bring in our first guest of the evening, which is Tim Stoodley from the Yellow Block podcast of Peterborough United. Tim, how are you feeling about Peterborough's prospects at the moment?
Can we talk about a different team? The problem is, Gab, I'm going to end up repeating everything I've said to you all season. I feel like there's maybe a sense of entitlement amongst the Posh fan base, and perhaps those that are maybe neutral to the club are just expecting Posh to suddenly start picking up points at some point. Every week it feels like, okay, now's when this will start to turn. We're scoring plenty of goals, but it's just not happening. And every week we're falling closer and closer to that drop zone, and we're one defeat away now from being in that drop zone. And so at some point you start to think, well, actually, maybe this could happen. Maybe there's a realistic chance that we could drop. And I think there's an arrogance in our fan base that we're, coined as maybe too big to drop, or, we're at the wrong end of the table, we'll come good. And I think actually what this is proving is that the league is such that anyone can drop at any point. Nobody would have put Posh as relegation favourites at the start of the season. And yet here we are. And as you quite rightly mentioned, the way that other clubs are starting to pick up points around us, whatever happens, there's probably going to be at least one big club going down this season. And more, I'm starting to think that actually that might be
could be Northampton.
No, I said big club, Gab.
Okay. James, what have you made of Peterborough? Because obviously, I think there is, and Tim's quite rightly pointed out, people sort of assumed it's Peterborough United, it's Darren Ferguson, think that they're going to get it right. But I think it's become increasingly evident this season that they're certainly not going to click in the way that we expected them to this season. And obviously, there's comments made after the Lincoln game about the softest group of players he's ever worked with. I mean, that kind of thing is going to hit home for those players, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I was going to mention the comments myself before you've stole my thunder a bit there, Gab. But obviously, that's not the thing you really want to hear as a Peterborough fan, I would say, Tim, when you've got still a large portion of the season to go. I mean, obviously, everyone likes honesty from the manager, but I thought it was a bit bold from Darren Ferguson, especially. He's never feeling too comfortable at Peterborough after his history with being sacked by Darren McAntony before. So I think, obviously, it was not stuff you really want to hear. But in terms of quality, obviously, we've talked about almost being too good to go down. And we've heard that phrase a lot previously. I think it happened with Blues last season a little bit. Luton this season in the Championship. There's these sides which kind of sleepwalk towards it. But if you look before Kwame Poku's injury, Peterborough were obviously hugely defensively leaky, but going forwards, there was definitely a lot of things to be positive about, and far away from the sides that are down there at the moment in terms of quality in that spell. Since he's gone out, I think Peterborough bottom on form, but obviously he's still to come back. And there are players in there. You look at the likes of Fernandez, even though he's young, he's still a very promising defender. Cipriano, and even the squad, the players in the squad that haven't proved themselves yet, likes of Con Clark and Hayes, who both have probably still got levels more to go. You would back Darren Ferguson to kind of get more out of them, even towards the end of the season. There's still a potential with Darren Ferguson and young players that they can always go up a few notches. So there's definitely more positives there for Peterborough, I'd say, than other sides. Just that, especially in the early part of the season, we've seen what can be done with this kind of group of players.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything you said there, James. I think going back to the comments post-Lincoln, I feel like Fergie's tried everything this season. He's tried taking the blame himself, So he's then pushed it onto the players. He's at times tried to not blame the hierarchy above him, but he's made reference to the fact that we've sold a lot of our main assets in the summer. So I feel like he's tried as much as he can to try different ways to get a reaction out of the players. He's gone out in January and said, I need an entire new backline. So he's done, I think, everything he can. He's very much trying to work with the tools that he was left with after a dreadful summer for us at the back end of last season. Yes, the Poku injury hasn't helped, but I feel in some ways that actually gives us a convenient excuse. We weren't looking great even before the Poku injury. Yes, he's the type of player that can turn games, and we probably would have 9-12 more points if he was available, which would changes the picture somewhat, but it would only paper over those cracks. That the problem this season came from the fact that we absolutely ransacked every piece of talent last summer, did our usual kind of buying from non-league and hoping it would come good, as it often does at Posh. Unfortunately, this time it hasn't. You mentioned some of the talent that's in the squad, and there is talent there. And I do feel like this is a League One squad. It's not a great League One squad, but it's certainly not League Two. And I feel that maybe that's perhaps a sign of the perhaps poor quality of League One this year. The fact that we are sort of down in that relegation battle, even though we've got I'd say an average League One team. But yeah, you would fancy him to do well, but ultimately we're running out of time. I do think he's probably doing the best he can with what he's got available to him at the moment. But ultimately, it's still entertaining football. There's certainly, it could be worse. We could be being outscored each week and not scoring. We're still scoring plenty. So I suppose we have to decide as a fan base, do we want entertaining football at the risk of going down, or do we want defensively sound football that's quite dull to watch?
I suppose there's a balance, isn't there? And I think that's a word that you could ascribe both to the style of football, but also probably the profiles of players. Because James mentioned Fernandes there. Like, he might be a talented defender that Norwich City are after because of that resale value, but he might also be not what you need in a relegation battle where it's roll your sleeves up and let's try and fight for our lives.
Yeah, and I do think that you make a good point now. I feel like that's going to be maybe the one thing that does see us drop, is because we're coming in now to that key part of the season, and we've got some huge games coming up in ultimately a relegation battle, and we've got a very young, inexperienced squad. And obviously there's two ways of looking at that. Maybe they've got that kind of youthful ignorance, that they don't get dragged into the emotion of a relegation battle. But equally, when you're in that relegation dogfight, you do need a leader. You do need experienced players that can take a game by the scruff of the neck. I'm sure there's other cliches I can throw in at this point, but I do wonder if that kind of young squad will cost us. Often it works in our favour. Obviously, we're normally at the other end of the table, and having that young team kind of helps because they don't get kind of carried away in all the pressure. But I wonder if actually it could be the reverse this season, and it could be potentially be our downfall, the fact that we've got so many young players.
Tim, do you think you're going to stay up this season?
I mean, throughout the season, I've been saying yes, because there's 4 worse teams than us. The way that other teams around us are starting to find a little bit of form, I'm not so sure, now. I mean, we've got the Cambridgeshire derby on the horizon. That is a huge game for us, massive game, especially with them obviously making managerial changes, this week as well. I still think there are 4 worse teams than Posh, but it's getting tighter every week, isn't it? I think we will drop into that zone over the next couple of weeks. Teams around us have got games in hand and so on and so forth. So, yeah, something needs to change. I don't see it changing too much with us. So I think we're relying on other teams losing some of that form that they seem to have picked up recently. In answer to your question, yes, I think we can. But it's going to be a lot closer than I would have anticipated.
I was going to ask you, do you look at Shrewsbury making this brilliant turnaround under Gareth Ainsworth, and the way that he sort of inspired the players with this sort of force of positivity and the freshness that's come from that? Cambridge United have appointed Neil Harris, who probably one of the best, like Ainsworth, probably one of the best managers you could ask for in this situation. Somebody who gets people up for the fight and who can kind of galvanise people. And I just wonder whether the fact that Darren McAntony, I think he's actually going to, given the character that I perceive Dara to be, I think he's the type of person that's going to respond well to Darren Ferguson saying what he said at Lincoln, because I think he's the kind of person that likes pulling no punches, saying, let's really say what we think. And I think that's probably why, almost what enticed Darren Ferguson to say it, because that if he's pitching for himself possibly for to start next season in charge, whether it's League One or League Two, that's the kind of thing that helps with that, along with his relationship with Darren McAntony anyway. But I do wonder whether that kind of freshness, new manager impact, Peter are going to kind of miss out on in a way that maybe a Shrewsbury or possibly a Cambridge won't.
Yeah, I think there's a flip side to it. You're absolutely right. You get that new manager bounce, and certainly for the right character. Fergie's not going anywhere anytime soon. If he was going to, Dara would have done so by now, as James alluded to. He's done it plenty of times before with Fergie, so he's not afraid to get rid of him if he needs to. I actually think it's quite refreshing.
He's not sacked him for like 15 years, though, Tim. Like because the last time. The last time it was Fergie, called him when he was in the shower or something and said, "I'm not." So, and then there was another time where I've literally lost track, but but I think maybe the last time might have been his second stint. It was either his second or his first. The last time Dara actually sacked him.
Yeah, but I guess the point is the fact that Dara isn't afraid to change managers if he feels a change is needed, and the fact he hasn't this season is. I actually think it's a positive because it's given Darren and probably the players and certainly Darren's staff the assurances that they're going to be there and they've got to work with what they've got. Darren isn't going anywhere. He'll still be manager at the start of next season. Even if we do go down, he'll keep Darren on as manager. I can't see Dara getting rid of Darren anytime soon, and that's purely because Darren's the only person consistently who has worked with Dara's personality and Dara's idea of how a football club should be run. The only other person that's come close to that is Grant McCann, and obviously he's having a great time at Donny, so he's not going to come back anytime soon. So I think Darren will stay there. The new manager bounce works if it's the right character. Obviously, like you said, we've seen that with Shrewsbury. Will we see it with Cambridge? Possibly. I think with Cambridge, it's probably come a little bit too late, and I feel like maybe. It's by getting Harris and Bonner, they've kind of just done we'll get people that have had a bit of success before back and hope for the best. I'm not sure if that duo will work together, but remains to be seen. I feel in a way keeping Darren on was probably the right thing to do. He knows this squad. He knows how the club works. So unless you bring in an Ainsworth type character, I don't think we would have achieved too much in swapping the manager. And it's actually reassuring to see that Dara is sticking with his guns and sticking with the manager and showing him a bit of faith. That's kind of nice to see. I think ultimately the issue comes from Dara, ironically, because he ultimately stripped all the assets out in the summer. That isn't Darren's fault. That's Dara's fault. I also wish we had a manager that didn't have a name very similar to our chairman. It's very difficult.
Yeah, you'll be hoping this is the last era of Darren Ferguson or Darren McAntony, one way or the other.
Or they can just change their name. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly, yeah. Tim, thanks so much for joining us, and look forward to catching up again soon.
No worries. Cheers, guys. Thank you. Cheers.
Yes, and everyone get subscribed to the Yellow Block podcast. Delighted to be joined now by Burton Albion fan David. David, it's great to have you on, and it's funny to actually see your face because I know your Twitter bio doesn't sort of directly show it, so it's good to see you. How are you feeling about Burton Albion's survival chances?
Yeah, it's been a good few weeks since the January transfer window. We've obviously made some good improvements to a team, and it's looking a lot more positive than it was at the turn of the year.
Certainly is. Talk to me about what Gary Bowyer has done to sort of steady the ship.
He's brought in players that have been needed, a lot of experience. Obviously, John Daddy Rodvarson. JJ McKiernan in from Lincoln, Owen Dodgson, who's played at this level before, are three of the key players that is added to the team, and all three of those have hit the ground running. And then he's added extras with the likes of James Jones, who we haven't seen too much of yet, Fabio Tavares as well got a goal against Bristol Rovers last week. So I think it's just changing the attitude of the team. I think it's slimming the squad down a bit more as well, because there's a lot of players in that team who didn't perform to expectations in the first half of the season.
James, what have you made of Burton Albion's sort of recent revival, and do you give them a sniff of beating the drop?
Oh, they're absolutely in the conversation. I mean, the recent form and the front two's form especially has been really, really impressive. I was actually just shocked when I looked at how many points they'd picked up since Gary Bowyer's come in. I was obviously, you see a result every now and then when you're looking at the score, you think, oh, Burton are winning, or Burton got a point. But when you look at their 10th since he's come in, 17 points under Gary Bowyer is pretty remarkable. Given I remember when Gareth Ainsworth was appointed at Shrewsbury, I think both Shrewsbury and Burton were on 7 points, I think, at that point, and it looked like both of them were pretty much nails for the drop then. Even when they come to St Andrews, though, before on Boxing Day, there was, even though they were beaten 2-0 and Blues were relatively comfortable, I think there were moments for Burton in that game. I think Burrell went forward in the first half and slipped a crucial point, and then there was a header just after the halfway mark, which they probably should have done better with. And I think generally you can't buy goals in these kind of scenarios down the bottom. We talked about Peterborough then, and the forwards thinking, the forward capacity that they've got with Jay Jones and Mothersill and Poku's come back. But with Burrell in such form, and I thought Bodvarsson was a really good option for Wrexham in the first half of the season. So to now be playing at the complete other end of the division. And then, as David mentioned, then you've got McKinnon, and Dodgson's deliveries have been fantastic lately. You can't really get much better attacking quality than they've got at the moment with an informed Burrell and the height and the nous of Bodvarsson.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about JJ McKinnon, David. Do you see? Do you think Lincoln have got a real player on their hands and somebody who could go into their team and after his loan spell?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, I've spoken to Jake quite a few times about him, because obviously coming from Lincoln, he's not had as many minutes as I think he would have liked in the first half of the season. And since coming into us, I think he's actually played more minutes for us now than he did for Lincoln in the first half of the season. And it's his quality on the ball and being able to drive at defenders and run into that left channel to create that overload with Dodgson and even Jack Armour at times, who will come round on the overlap as well. It really creates a lot of problems for teams that we come up against.
Yeah, certainly does. I'm wondering where have Burton Albion got to improve to make sure that this form continues?
My worry is the depth in the squad. We've actually just signed Anthony Ford this afternoon, which I think is a really good option, good utility option to fill in the squad. But obviously Van Kooten got sent off on Tuesday night. He's going to be out for a few weeks. We've still got a couple of injuries as well, relatively all in midfield as well. James Jones is out, Kegs Chalk is out. Kieran Gilligan hasn't been seen for a few weeks. Fabio Tavares is now injured as well. He got injured against Bristol Rovers. Jason Sarraha is just coming back, I think, in the next couple of weeks from an injury as well. So we're looking a bit light on the bench. I mean, we could only name 6 substitutes on Tuesday night. But all those that are in the squad are getting minutes and like on Tuesday, just showing that grit that we need for the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think you're going to stay up then?
I'd love to say that we are. The difficulty we've got is we've still got every single one of the top 8 teams to play. 4 of them are at home, 4 of them are away. Our season won't be defined from those matches, but we've got games against Shrewsbury in a couple of weeks' time, which is huge. We've got Mansfield next Saturday, which is another big fixture as well. But having to go to the likes of Wrexham, we've still got Wickham, Stockport away. They're all going to be free hit games, which if we can get any points from those, it will be bonus points to what we can hopefully pick up against the teams in the middle and the bottom 8 of the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just wondering, I mean, that victory at Stevenage was obviously a huge result for you, because that's really kind of given you some the sort of inspiration, I guess, if you can go there and grind out a result. I'm wondering about Max Crocombe and Ryan Sweeney, and how important you think they've been to you this season.
They've been massive, both this season and last season. Just both absolute mountains at the back for us. I couldn't even tell you how many points the two of them have saved between them. Just both getting their bodies on the line. Max comes up with huge saves throughout games. Sweeney is a danger in both boxes. I think he's going to be a little bit disappointed he's not got more contributions in the attacking box. But defensively, everything goes to those two, and they make countless blocks and tackles and saves just to keep points.
Well, certainly steering on the right track. So well done to Gary Bowyer for the work that he's doing, and hopefully you can finish the job and make another great escape at the Pirelli. So we'll have to see. But thanks so much for joining us, David. And,
no problem.
Yeah,
Thank you, David.
Cheers. Thank
you. So our next guest is Cambridge United fan Freddie Owers. Freddie, good time to be talking to you because it's been quite an interesting period for Cambridge United. I don't think anyone saw the news coming that you're about to bring Mark Bonner back as director of football, a different role, of course, to when he was manager previously, and also bring back Neil Harris as head coach.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely not what I was expecting at 5 p.m. on a random Wednesday, especially so soon after parting ways with Monk. But it was obviously going to divide a lot of people. That was the first thing that I said was some people are going to hate it, some people are going to love it. I am happy with the appointments, and I think you've got to take into consideration a lot of factors about why Harris left last season. Some people probably won't forgive him until they see things happen. Some people do understand it. I'm one of the people that sort of said fair enough because of the situations and his ties to Millwall. It didn't leave us in the greatest position, but he had done enough work to, in hindsight, to keep us up. And then Monk did a good enough job last season. And Bonner being back is something I don't think any Cambridge United fan is going to be annoyed at. Because I think we all love him and we trust him and he understands the club despite not having a lot of experience in a director of football role.
Yeah, absolutely. James, what do you make of those returns at the Abbey?
I think it'll be really interesting how it's going to go. I remember speaking to you, Gab, after Neil Harris left Millwall, and we both said he's one of those managers where he could have got a job at any level in the EFL, and I would not have been surprised at this point. I mean, coming back to Cambridge, I probably wouldn't have had that one high up on the list, but in terms of the level, I'm not surprised. I think it's positive if you look at the way that Millwall started this season under Harris before all the complications that went on there. I mean, I don't think, with the greatest respect to them, apart from Romain Esse who was there, they had the greatest attacking talent, but they were creating a lot of chances. And even though they might have been a bit wasteful with those, they were definitely looking a bit more progressive going forward than the typical side you'd associate with Harris and with Millwall. And I think there is work that can be done with the Cambridge forwards. I thought before the game to Blues, where obviously they were absolutely battered there, there was a lot of positive play from Stokes particularly, and I think they were using Ryan Loft really well with the diagonal balls, and Kachunga was in okay form as well. Obviously Don Ballard's come in, I really like him as well. So I think there is work that can be done there. And Harris obviously is, like I say, track record from earlier in the season is creating a fair amount of chances. So there's something positive to take from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Freddie, I'm really excited to see how Mark Bonner does get on in this role, because I think when he left Gillingham, he was expecting to go back in somewhere as a manager. So that's clearly his sort of ultimate North Star. So kind of curious to see how it'll work from that point of view. And also, but on the other hand, he has, demonstrated while he was manager of Cambridge United previously some of the skill sets that would kind of overlap a little bit with the director of football. So he seemed to be heavily involved in the recruitment process. He seemed to have an interest in the day-to-day running of the club beyond literally just what's happening on the field. And so it's and also he's somebody who really cares about the club given his sort of long-standing association.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of he understands what it's like to not be the manager as well, and to be in backroom staff, to be a coach, to work very, very closely with the director of football at the time, Ben Strang, and I think he obviously wouldn't have fitted into that role at any other club, but it does make a lot of sense being at Cambridge United, because he is Cambridge United. You know what I mean? It's all he's ever known really until he left as head manager, and I completely understand the vision. I completely see it. I can see it going really well, and I really hope that it does. And then accompanied with Neil Harris, who is just a results man. He just knows how to get it done. We're in a very difficult spot at the moment. And if you'd asked me 2 days ago, in fact, I was dreading having to come back on here and sort of eat my words from a few weeks ago, being a bit optimistic, because the form is very, very bad. But this is definitely the right thing to do, I think, to if we have any chance of making a change.
One thing I'd love to see you build on under Mark Bonner and Neil Harris is the youth academy, because I think that goes under the radar. I think your youth crop did very well in the FA Youth Cup, and might have beaten Arsenal or something along those lines. You've got McConnell, I think, George Hoddle, Dan Barton, and I'm sure there's one or two others in the academy that are really talented. So a lot to build on there.
Yeah, I mean, we in the last few years have had quite a good record of getting players through the academy into the first team, who have been very good. I mean, Liam Bennett came through and has been a sort of a staple of the starting 11 for a couple of seasons now. Barton has been one of our most impressive players this season, I'd say. He often doesn't have the stats to prove it, but just by watching the games, you can tell that he's definitely one to keep hold of and keep integrating in the first team.
Right, and Joku was the other one I quite like as well. He seems to have a lot of energy about him.
Yes, he does, and he's proven himself as a good option up top when we need him to be. He's scored this season. He's definitely. He even made a few appearances last season where he impressed, and I hope that we keep a hold of him and keep using him. And hopefully we're going to see the return of a few of our main first team players as well for the rest of the season. So yeah, I mean, the integration often works really well at Cambridge United, and hopefully we can use them to our benefit towards the end of this season, but also looking into next season to keep a hold of them. And if we're in League Two, I think they can be really good options. And if we're in League One somehow, then they can also be good backup.
James, do you think Cambridge United are relying on a low points total to have any sort of chance of staying up? Because if I look at things at the moment, if we say it's 45 points keeps you up, that would leave Cambridge needing 22 points from 15 games, which is basically, now what would that be? I think something like 1.3 points per game between now and the end of the season, which is fairly realistic. Whereas
Harris has the exact points per game in his career, or something like that. Neil Harris has about 1.3 points per game as a general stat. So
interesting. No, that's really interesting.
Not bad optimism there.
Yeah. So James, do you think if it's 50 points, it's going to be more of a stretch for Cambridge, but if it's 45, they might have a sniff?
Yeah, I mean, you never know how it's going to go, and new managers can pick up a lot of points very quickly. Could get 2 or 3 wins in a row, and then suddenly that points tally is looking a lot smaller. I think what goes against them is their away form has been really, really poor, and all of their games against Crawley, Shrewsbury, Wigan, those teams in and around them are away. So that's going to be a bit of a challenging one for them. But on the positive, they have got to play every side they have beat. There's not many of them apart from Mansfield. I think have you played Mansfield twice, Freddie? Is that right?
Yeah, we lost away and won at home.
Yes, but all the other sides that they picked up a win against, still got to play. I think it looks a little bit of a stretch too far at the moment for me, but things can change very quickly. Sorry, Freddie, I don't want to kill all your optimism.
I'd be inclined to totally agree with you. I put out a tweet after the weekend's game, just saying I think that's pretty much the nail in the coffin. Because
and then Harris comes in, and you think, oh, maybe.
It's very interesting how something that isn't results based can change your outlook on your expectations. But I just think Neil Harris as a manager is a sort of manager that will just make sure that he gets as much as possible out of the players. And we have the derby coming up, which is obviously an absolutely huge game given the circumstances. And if there's one thing that Neil Harris could do to completely win the fans over, it's to beat Peterborough and send them down. Yeah, we'll see. But there's still a lot to play for. That's all that I'll say. There's a lot to play for, and it would take a lot. But I think we are doing the decisions made over the last week, 10 days have been, in my opinion, the correct ones.
Freddie, what's the first sort of thing on Neil Harris and Mark Bonner's intro? Well, let's say in Neil Harris's case, his intro in terms of how do I make this team competitive straight away? Any simple tweaks that he can make to the team to improve performance?
I think one thing that Monk did that was obvious with the vision, but just didn't work with the personnel, was trying to implement that different style of football with the 3-back, playing out from the back. I don't think it's something that we have really the personnel to do. In principle, it's a good thing, but the league is very strong, I think, this season in particular. And there are teams that just man for man have been able to negate any sort of intricate game plan or overly on the floor game plan, which is something that obviously you want your team to be playing good football, but sometimes you have to just focus on results. And right now, I think Neil Harris is going to definitely just focus on making sure that we use every single player to the best of their abilities. We have the personnel up top coming back in Dan Lundalu to play a bit more of a direct style of football, I guess. And it seems a bit ugly to say that you want your team to play a more direct style of football sometimes, but I think it would work in our favour. And yeah, he'll just churn out the best out of every single player and play to our strengths. And then personnel-wise, I think there are players that Monk just couldn't get on the right sides of, and who sort of fell through the cracks, I think, in the squad, and maybe didn't seem from the outside motivated to do their best, and were just coasting. I really cannot see that being the case on the Neil Harris. He'll definitely get everyone focused and motivated, and that's. And just to be able to leave the pitch after every game and say that they've played to the best abilities and they're fighting for the badge, which is what you need in a relegation battle, to be honest.
Well, and especially with Cambridge United, and that's the thing that I've always felt. If you go back to the team that made that sort of run up the leagues under John Beck in the 1980s, that was a team of fighters and scrappers, and a team that would never give in. And I think that mentality, I think Mark Bonner, Richard Money, if you're going back a bit further, these are people who kind of revitalised and kind of brought that essence of Cambridge United back to life. And I'm hoping that Neil Harris can do that, because I definitely think it's a good fit for him. I know it was unfortunate the situation last time around, but I do feel like Neil Harris is somebody who fits the ethos of Cambridge United. Hopefully he can build something. It might be next season rather than this one, but we'll have to wait and see. So go on.
I was going to say this decision definitely obviously takes into consideration the circumstance, so he could be in League Two next season. And if that is the case, I think that we're putting ourselves in a good position to build a team and have a manager that can put us in playoffs or autos contention. I really do think so. A lot of fans are quite worried about if we do go down, what the sort of stagnation is going to be like, or if we're going to struggle to even hit mid-table. But I think that the personnel that we've brought in as leadership will give us a good foundation to build a very, very strong League Two side, should that be the case.
Well, let's hope that's the case. Freddie, it's been good to chat to you. Nice to talk with a little bit more optimism about Cambridge United. Best of luck for the rest of the season.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Freddie.
Cheers.
Cheers, Freddie. So, James, one thing that I'm really curious about is, although I feel like we're talking about Burton Albion, Shrewsbury Town, and Cambridge United, all with a little bit of optimism, albeit Cambridge have 8 points to make up. But I don't think that any of those 3 teams are going down without a fight. And even Crawley, they've only lost 2 of their last 6. So, they're sort of playing some good football at times and showing something. So I feel like 1 or 2 of the current bottom 4 are going to put a real run together and find kind of top half form towards the end of the season, which again, I think is going to put a bit of heat on the teams currently sitting above.
Yeah, I think I was quite skeptical of the teams above a few weeks ago. I thought that with the form of the bottom 4 at the moment, who have been there for quite some time, I thought that one of those or 2 of those just above would drop in. But then you look, Bristol Rovers at home have been great. Northampton have picked up. As I mentioned, Peterborough, I'm still confident on them with the goals that they've got, even though they're so defensively leaky. I think the team, it's just becoming such a competitive battle down there. I mean, the quality of the League One relegation battle at the moment feels like it's higher than it has been for a while. Even if you take away that those teams maybe aren't as good as some of the teams that have gone down in previous years. Just generally the competitive nature around the bottom, it seems like there's so little between them, and so much that can change. I think there's still a lot of games to be played between those teams down there, which is going to make all the difference, really. And then I still do think there's a big gap between the teams at the bottom trying to take points off the top 6, top 7. I think that could go against some of the teams. So we talked about Burton there. You said about optimism. Obviously, they've been on a great run, but they've got the highest points per game left of opponents out of any of the sides. So maybe it will even out a little bit more when they come up against some of those top teams. And the fact there's still so much to play for in the automatics and the promotion rate, the playoff race as well, probably doesn't help them, because all the teams that are up there towards the top end are still going to have a lot to play for as well.
Yeah, there's not much of a mid-table, is there? I suppose you would say Lincoln, Barnsley, Blackpool and Stevenage, maybe Rotherham, you would class in that sort of mid-table bracket. But it feels like anyone Reading or above has a shot at the playoffs, and anyone Mansfield down could be vulnerable. I mean, I think Bristol Rovers and Northampton have both made some strides, haven't they, under Inigo Calderon and Kevin Nolan, respectively, which gives them a bit of a chance.
Yeah, definitely. I think those ones, I was skeptical of both appointments at the time. They were both, obviously, Nolan's been out of the game for a while, and Calderon, it's his first professional job. Am I right in saying senior job?
First in sort of senior football. So he's under 21s.
Yeah, and that can always be a risk, can't it, when you're bringing them in at this kind of stage of the season without a pre-season as well. But both have definitely had results, and Bristol Rovers have continued their home form that's been so strong. Northampton have obviously had a few surprising results and picked up some points in games you might not have expected them to, which does just show how important those managerial changes can be at this kind of point in the season. And then you talked about the mid-table there. I think really it's sort of a strange one towards the end of the season, because for the first 2/3 of the season, you want to really play as many teams towards the bottom of the division as you can get. But really, the golden games in those last 5-6 games are going to be those teams in mid-table that are, I don't want to say on the beach, but, if they've not got as much on the line, you probably want to be playing your Mansfield, your Stevenage, your Blackpool come the last 5-6 games. You don't want to be facing any of the top 6 or anyone knocking on the door. And those games against the teams around you are going to be so tightly contested and probably a bit more nervy from both teams to lose, rather than when you're playing those mid-table teams.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I'm probably of the it's easy to say because based on the table, but I probably am most worried about Peterborough, just because I know they've got Pocky to come back in March, which could make a huge difference for them, because we know how good an attacking team they are when he's on the pitch. But I always feel like in a relegation dogfight, you want to be you want to be able to have really solid foundations. And I'm just worried about Peterborough that, if they keep leaking goals, it's going to be difficult to sort of get a handle on their season. So going into the last third of the campaign, Peterborough are probably the team that I'm most worried about.
Yeah, I think when you've got a bit more solidity at the back, you like Shrewsbury and Burton, you probably associate that more with the managers that they've got in there, and Darren Ferguson probably is a bit more of an attacking specialist. You're probably leaving yourself a little bit less to do when you've got a defensive foundation. You might nick a goal 1-2-0, 2-1, something like that. But when you're Peterborough and you're conceding so many, so leaky, you're probably relying on Poku, Mothersill, Ricky J. Jones to score 2, 3, 4 every kind of game, really, and how sustainable that's going to be, especially against those better defences in the division. And I do think that's been quite the strong point, really, I would say, of the division this season is, whilst there's probably a little bit lacking quality in terms of the disparity between the top and bottom sections of the division, that I think there's been a real strength of out of possession work in terms of presses and that kind of thing. I think when you look throughout the division, even your Stevenage, Rotherham, those kind of teams mid-table, I do think they've got good out of possession structures in place, at least in the first third, in terms of cutting out that playing out from the back. That's definitely improved. So when you're Peterborough and you're trying to play out from the back a little bit more, and then you're trying to be a bit more progressive, and you haven't really got the quality to do that maybe as much as other teams, and you're coming up against teams that are a bit stronger in the press, it's probably going to spell some warning signs for them. So that's the only concern I'd have with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you had to pick a bottom four, then James, who would you go for?
Cambridge, I think when they come to Blues last week, they were the poorest team I've seen. So I'm going to say Cambridge are going down. Crawley, I just think they might lack the quality a little bit in those games.
Yeah,
I don't know if they have it at either end in abundance.
I also think that for the style of football Crawley want to play, I don't know if it suits a relegation battle, especially the high stakes point of the season. Whereas I think the style that Neil Harris, Gareth Ainsworth and Gary Bowyer is going to get their teams playing, I think gives them maybe a better chance, I would say, than Crawley.
Yeah, I think obviously the Rob Elliott appointment will have definitely taken into consideration the possibility of them going down, and that he can be a man that they can build around again next season, in the same way they did with Scott Lindsay. I'm looking at the table now. I think Wigan will definitely be fine, and Mansfield. I'm not worried about those two.
They've got good points tally. So
yeah, and I still think the foundation's there in the two sides. I'd feel more confident if I was in those two dressing rooms in terms of still think they're better teams than the rest. Exeter on a terrible run, but do have good bits of quality. I'm gonna say Northampton are gonna slip in, and I'll say Burton because of David's concerns about the depth. I think Shrewsbury will just get out.
Yeah, I kind of agree that Shrewsbury. I know Northampton have made some progress under Kevin Nolan, but I think I would probably go with Northampton and Peterborough going down, with Burton and Shrewsbury escaping. So I think Crawley might finish bottom. I think I've got a feeling that. Say again?
Cambridge just above them. Are you going?
I might actually. I think Cambridge are going to make. Maybe Cambridge 23rd, Peterborough 22nd, and Northampton just in 21st, but very interchangeable with Burton. And I think Shrewsbury might end up in 19th. So that's my prediction from where things are.
Not going to be very popular in that part of the world, I don't think. Peterborough,
I know, yeah.
Cambridge.
But I'm predicting their rivals to go down. So it's
There's always a silver lining.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, listen, there you have it. James, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast this evening. Where can people find your stuff?
Find me on Twitter. The @ is just next to my name there. There's a lot of stuff on League One, mostly Birmingham City centred, but there is stuff relating to most teams in the division. Do a bit of Championship stuff as well.
Yeah, be a bit more Championship next season, perhaps.
Yeah, hopefully.
Absolutely. You recovered from Tuesday night, the Wednesday.
Absolutely magnificent. Obviously Newcastle atmosphere was fantastic, but I don't think I've gone to a game and come away feeling so positive in a long time. I was absolutely buzzing, and hopefully it'll be a good day out at Wembley. Hopefully a trophy to maybe go with the league as well. That'll be nice. And well, we'll see what happens this midweek. Peterborough, Wrexham. I'm very confident it's going to be Wrexham, to be honest. But I would like to see Peterborough nick it. But yeah, it was a great night, and I'm very pleased for Lyndon Dykes as well to get the goal. I think he's earned that lately.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Well, hopefully it should be a great day out at Wembley, first since 2011, of course.
Yes,
for Birmingham City. James, thanks so much for joining us. It's been wonderful to get your insight. I'd implore any of you to follow James on Twitter at James with the 3 instead of the E _34. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify at EFL Debate, and we'll see you again for another League One podcast next week.